Welcome back to the SheSuite, where we elevate conversations about power, presence, and purpose, especially for women who belong at the top. Today's guest is a true architect of leadership culture, a scholar, a corporate trailblazer, a visionary HR leader, and a global thinker who has dedicated her career to cultivating leaders, expanding opportunity, and propelling women into positions of influence. Our guest today is an executive leader at a major sports organization, recognized as a national voice on leadership, equity, and executive impact, a TEDx speaker and published scholar on women's leadership journeys. And today we are talking about women in the C suite, not just getting there, but transforming it. Dr. Rhodes, thank you so much and welcome to the She Suite. So let's just kind of start with who you are at your core and what has shaped your leadership identity.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited and humbled to be a part of this. And it's so funny when I hear people say things about me, I am reminded by my sons, and I continue to be humble because they're like, "Who are you all talking about?" And all they care about is how much money I get them out of my ATM. So
Yes.
thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It is a joy to be here and in speaking about my journey and the things that I've done. I don't know if I even thought about as I made decisions in my career or I made decisions from a scholarly perspective that I was thinking of, oh, this is where I want to get to. I
Mhm.
think at every junction of things that have occurred for me, it was about what impact could I provide at that time. And so that's how I thought of things throughout my career, and am thankful of how it's culminated, and and appreciative of those that poured back into me. So that gives you a little bit of synopsis, kind of how I started. It's funny, I tell people because they laugh. I actually have I have a undergraduate degree in hotel restaurant management, and I thought that I was going to be running restaurants or hotels, and I
Ooh.
took a very different path than that. So I'll start with that.
Well, that definitely gives me some insight into who you are and our listeners because that's so true of most people when they graduate from college and whatever degree they thought they were going to be in is not truly what happens. I thought I was going to be on your evening news as a news reporter and have not stepped foot in one news center since graduating with communications degree. So here we are. So let's get a little bit into your path to the C-suite. So you work for one of the most amazing baseball teams in the world, one of my personal favorites, Atlanta Braves. We've spent a lot of time in your stadium. So, what experiences leading up to where you are today, earlier in your career, shaped your view of leadership and how your belief that women really truly belong in the C-suite?
So that's a great question. And I have to say to you that my belief that women should be anywhere started probably with my grandmother,
Mm.
because my grandmother was a school teacher in a rural town in Arkansas, and I would go there every summer. And I think the concept of women having places and spaces that we are to belong is something that she started with me as a little girl. So I don't even, it's not something that I said, oh, let me think about what this is. I think because it was poured into me, that's how things should be. I
Mhm.
mean, she was a graduate of University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. She did all of these amazing things in her community, and I could see what she did in her community, and I always was reminded by her when she was living. And then when I got older, about the fact that you don't make yourself small. And so when I start thinking about journeys and thinking about things that I've had the opportunity to experience and be a part of and do, it really has been in my mind the way it's supposed to be set up. Now, that's not to say that there have been barriers from that standpoint, that there have
Mhm.
been individuals or situations that have probably not felt the same way that I did. But for the most part, I think for me, that was such a guiding purpose for me, and it was instilled in me to do that. So let's go back to even how I got to the Atlanta Braves. It's funny. The story with that is that I don't think things happen happenstance. I do think that things are ordered in a very interesting way. And a lot of times you don't know that they're being ordered. I worked for at the time, and it was 2008, I worked for Turner Broadcasting. And at the time that I started with them, the Atlanta Braves was being spun off to go be a part of another organization called Liberty Media. So they were a subsidiary of Liberty Media, but that leadership team was still in place. So that was in 2008. When you fast forward, and a lot of things happen between that fast forward. So I have two sons that play baseball. So they
Mhm.
started out playing t-ball and played baseball all the way until high school. And then during that time frame, I worked at different organizations, but got a phone call about the Atlanta Braves. And when I got the phone call and I had the interview, it's interesting. I think I was the coolest mom ever at that particular point in time.
Mhm.
And so, interestingly enough, that same leadership team that I had the opportunity to meet very, very briefly in 2008 is the same leadership team that was in place when I got hired in and is still in place. And so I think in terms of that journey, that experience that I had at Turner Broadcasting gave me a great view into what the sports world looked like because there's so many components of Turner Broadcasting, and I supported various different parts of the organization. And then to, as we like to say in baseball, get called up to
Mhm.
be a part of the Atlanta Braves was an actual manifestation, I think, of the time that I was with Time Warner, Turner Broadcasting, and then Time Warner. And so I didn't even think about those steps being ordered from that standpoint. But when I look at it now and think about the experiences that I had and all of that being linked together for my career from an HR perspective, is where I ended up. And I will tell you, even having started here, because I'm going into my 8th season with the Atlanta
Mhm.
Braves. And
Wow.
having said that, I started here as the SVP of Human Resources. And at the time that I've been here, my actual path has grown even more. So from the standpoint of I started as the SVP of Human Resources, I now am the Chief People and Culture Officer. And so not only do I have human resources, I also have communications and community affairs as well. And I think about that growth that continues to happen. So when we talk about women being in spaces, again, from my perspective of what my grandmother taught me and what
Mhm.
I have done throughout my career, it has been a matter of those are steps that were ordered, and I've been able to step in or walk through the door when the opportunity has come along.
You definitely said a mouthful there because growing up, I grew up very similar where I was always taught that I belonged in whatever room I stepped my foot in. Like probably confidence overload. However, I am noticing that I have raised my 18-year-old exact same way. And seeing her fully step into her college journey now as an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Alabama, and she's getting these invites to apply for all these different honor program things and all these different associations that they have. And it's just like they give her an invite, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." I'm like, absolutely. I love that confidence. But that confidence is something we tend to lose as we get older. And so as we continue to go through our journeys and things happen that kind of knock us off of our confidence block, it's so important to make sure that we stay true to who we are and that upbringing that we've had to make sure that that confidence voice stays strong and that that's a muscle that has to be worked as we go through the trials and tribulations of becoming corporate women.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right because I think one of the things is that it centers you. So as
Right.
you're dealing with things and because it's so easy to be derailed. It really
Mhm.
is from a conversation, from an email, from a situation. It is so easy to be derailed. And I think that centers me because I can, instinctually, I feel like my grandmother is sitting on my shoulder
Mhm.
saying things to me as things are happening. And
Yep.
it's the other part that I have to add is that when I made the decision to go back and get my doctorate, I did it in one position and I changed jobs 3 times during that time frame.
Mhm.
And during the time that I was going back to get my doctorate, my grandmother passed away. And one of the things that I remember, I had a professor that said to me that he did not feel like I was committed to the doctoral program and that I would be all but dissertation. And I remember that conversation vividly because I drove back home and, one of those things where the funny story my sons will tell you is if it's a bad day, I'll get into the bed with all my clothes on and my shoes like this. And so it happened to be one of those days. And
Oh, that's it.
I remember getting up the next morning and saying, that's not what's going to happen. Like, that's not my destiny. That is not what's happening. I'm not going to have someone pour into me when I know that this is something that is very important for me to complete and do. And so I think you have to have that center for you to
Yes.
be able to continue forge on, whatever F word you want to use
Mhm.
to make sure you continue moving forward.
Absolutely. And you just kind of led me into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Your doctoral work was exploring how women survive and thrive in corporate leadership. So, how did your research inform how you're leading today?
So it's interesting you're asking me that question because I just had a conversation with somebody, I think 2 days ago, about this very thing. When I started going through the doctoral process, because it is a process, one of the things that you want to start thinking about is the research that you want to do, because typically that research lives with you.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
you are going to be with that research for a very long time, so you better like it. So
Hmm.
I remember having the conversations and doing this exercise of the intersects of things that I wanted to be able to speak to. I knew that it was about women. I knew that it was about leadership and how women move through. And then it's interesting when we started having the conversation, I started having the conversation with my committee, we started saying, oh, survival factors that women go through. And I remember my major professor, who is a prolific author and just woman, period. And she said to me, you're going to need to narrow it down. It can't be women, just all women. You're going to have to narrow that down and figure out what that looks like because you will never graduate. And she said, the other thing I need for you to think about and consider if you narrow it down. And when we were having that conversation, she said, the best way you can narrow it down is how do you relate to it? And I felt that it was critical as a Black female. What does that look like?
Hmm.
She said, okay, so we know that we've narrowed it down to Black women. She asked me the question, is it really success? She said, because I want you to really think about that word. Is it success or is it survival?
Mm.
And when she started talking to me and I started accounting my experiences, I'm like, you're right. It's survival. It's those things that I had to, for a lack of a better way of saying it, purpose my way through them because there were barriers that happened. There was isolation. There was lack of sponsorship.
Mhm.
There was the most difficult assignments to have to do and overcome. And she was right. And so when I was able to start thinking about that from that frame, it's not that it made the dissertation easier. Let me just start there. But what it
Mhm.
did is it gave purpose to what I knew the research needed to be. And by the way, at the time that I did my research, and I don't think it's much different, there are some scholars out there that have done the research because my research wasn't seminal work, but it was not a lot of their out there about Black women,
Mhm.
much like medical research, much like many things that we as Black females go through. And so when we started talking about it, and I chose the women that are a part of my study, and my major professor said, you need to be a part of it too, because your journey is much the same. When we start doing these interviews, we
Yes.
all set in different places here. We set in different industries. We set in different positions in our industries that we were in, but we all were experiencing the same thing. And I think the other piece to that is the level of complete isolation is the one piece that probably is the most debilitating part of it.
Mhm.
Because the moment that you feel like you're isolated, your level to trust others that will support you becomes very small. And so I think through that and I think through that experience, and I'm glad we did it the way we did because even to this day, I do know that there are scholars that are doing research beyond what I ever talked about. But the reality is that it is still such an essential part of what Black women experience when they are in corporate.
I resonate so much with that, because what I also found in my own leadership journey was that with every title and every time I reached that next step, I didn't get the fulfillment that I thought I was gonna get because in reality, I was chasing validation and not actual titles, right?
Right.
When I got to I say the she suite, but when I got to the C-suite, um, I realized I still had the same battles and I was still surviving, just with more pay and more problems. And I was like, this is not, but when I talk to my other female friends that are not African American, their experience just looked completely different. But I'm sure
Yeah.
they probably still had some similar battles because they were women. But it
Yeah.
was just like they looked so happy and thriving and flourishing and stress-free, and I'm over here losing my hair, having
Right.
migraines, and
Right.
it was just like this was not at
Yeah.
all what I envisioned. So, kind of talk us through what that looks like and how to calm that noise in our head, what's reality is.
So, one thing I'll say to you, and I think I still suffer from it today,
Mhm.
is I'm always having to prove myself. And I
Always.
think that's the difference. I think the difference for our white female counterparts is that they don't. So
Mhm.
it is with everything I do, with how I do it, I feel like it is constantly questioned and I'm having to prove myself. And I think there's two concepts to think about with this. One of my perspectives is that iron sharpens iron, right? In
Mhm.
order for me to stay on my game, iron sharpens iron. I'm trying to make sure I'm in there and I'm running it, I'm doing it. By the way, that does get old and you get tired of that,
Absolutely.
right? And so I think, and I love your frame of question of how do you quiet the noise? I don't necessarily know if I've ever quieted the noise. I think it's
Mhm.
still there. I think I still hear it. I think the difference now for me is the worst that could happen is I get fired from this particular job.
Mhm.
And my thing is that my title doesn't define me. So if you experience me and you feel like I led with my title, that's misplaced because it doesn't. So it's one of those things where you get to the point. And by the way, it's an age thing because as old as I am now, it looks very different
We're gonna talk about
than when I was.
in a minute. Menopause caused a lot of noise, okay? But go ahead.
Oh yeah, because menopause is its own storm. So so,
Yes. Yes.
so I think it comes to both of those things, right? It
Mhm.
comes to, I've done this enough to know, what game's going to be played now, and how do I take my playbook out and I run the game that I know to play, or whatever playbook you may have. And then the other part is that what's the worst that can happen?
Mhm.
And I really hope that I've created meaningful and intentional relationships that if I were to lose my job today, those people that cared about what my title was, they'll go away. But I'm hoping that the other relationships that I created that were meaningful, that were a part of going back to that center, that were a part and a tapestry of my experience, that it's just not about my job.
Yes.
Now, what I will say is that what is important to me is if I have the opportunity to open doors, make things easier, um, show ways with which people can come through, and it's easier than the way that I had to go through it. I hope that's what I'm doing.
Mhm.
But I'm also okay with the fact that if someone comes and says, we don't need you anymore, that I can say, not a problem, and get my bag and coat and I can walk out the door. And you know, I don't know. You said something I think that is also very very important. Like we have to have confidence, and I don't want to come off as being arrogant by saying that, but at some point in time, you've got to get to a place where you're very comfortable with what you bring. And
Mhm.
if what you bring is not what they want, somebody else will want it. And I talk about that in my book because I have a saying that there's somewhere somebody wants your talent. And so
Mm,
I believe in that. And so we'll see what else the journey brings, but I'm hoping if people are listening that they're not getting debilitated by things that are happening, whether it's a no or it's somebody that's not supporting you or you don't feel like you are getting what you should where you are. That means there's somewhere else to be.
as I coach a lot of women, that is the same conversation that I have. I notice a lot of them stay in roles that no longer fit who they are. They've grown out of those roles. They've grown out of those companies. I went through that in my own career journey where I stayed with the company for 5 years, took a promotion thinking that that was going to make me happy, and just finally realized that my brand had become bigger than that role and bigger really than that organization, and it was time for me to move on. And it was a hard crossroads when I made that decision to leave, but I find that a lot of women get stuck in their comfort zones. And one of my favorite quotes is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And once I heard that, that's what made me decide to leave the company that I had been with for 5 years because I was like, "Nope, I've gotten comfortable," but they had also gotten comfortable because they thought I was
Yes.
gonna leave. So I
Yeah.
was putting up with a lot of things that I should not have had to put up with.
Yeah.
So once we finally had that come to Jesus meeting with ourselves and realize that the confidence is there, we have the ability to do whatever we want to do, then that definitely helps us know the sky is the limit. But this kind of brings me to something else I want us to talk about. So you're just guiding this conversation. I love it. So, why do you think, outside of what we just talked about, why do you think so many women still plateau right before the C suite? Because you have so many women that get stuck
Mm.
at that middle management level.
So before I answer that question,
Mhm.
because there's some pieces of it in my research that talks about that. But going back to what you just said about that other thing, I have always seen myself as a free agent.
Yep.
So if I'm a free agent, that means that what I'm giving and selling that you're
Mhm.
buying, I can make a different decision at any given time because my commodity is me. And what I bring to bear. And so I think when we start thinking like that and realize that we have other options, it looks very
Mm.
different. To answer your question about plateauing, I think, this research is so old. It's a Harvard Business Review that talks about women's careers and that it's not a ladder, it's a lattice.
Mhm.
And how, because of things that we do as women, like have children, and
Mhm.
we have to do that and have to bear that particular responsibility and role, and we end up not making decisions based on a ladder. It has to be a lattice, so we may make decisions to go across because it gives us different experience as opposed to going up, and then that up looks different, and so forth and so on. What I think has happened, and what had happened to many of the women that are in my research, is that they made a decision that they did not want to do that anymore. So if they
Mhm.
were in corporate and they were at a level and they weren't seeing what they wanted, then they decided to become an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Or if it was something else that they wanted, they may have gone into academia. It ended up being that I can make that choice because two things. I don't see representation that looks like me.
Yep.
And I realize that if I get there, I'm then going to have to carry what that looks like. So representation truly is important. And at the end of the day, I'm tired. Like, I want to have fulfillment that looks different than what it is now. And I can see across and see the fulfillment can possibly be me running my own business Or fulfillment can mean that I'm going to go into a nonprofit organization and I'm going to run a mission. Like fulfillment can look very different than what typically is said that we have to be on this corporate ladder. Now, people can easily say to me, okay, Deretta, you say that, but that's not what you did. And you're right. You know what? A lot of the decisions that I made were because I became a divorced mom to two sons when they were the ages of 8 and 10. And
Mm,
for me, I could shut out a lot of those other things because my focus was what I needed to do for my sons as a single Black female.
mhm.
And so that was a decision point for me that would look different for others if you are in also the space that you are having to live and work at the same time, because we don't live singular focused lives. They're multidimensional. You got all this stuff that's happening at the same time. And so, not that it's my argument or not are my defense, but I would just say I made a different choice, but I made that different choice based on the fact that I had two sons that I had to raise and I needed to ensure that they continued to get the things they needed to do. And my corporate role was the one that helped me do that. All the other things I ended up doing that were important to me. So my community work, board work that I'm on, my research that I still think is critically important that I still try to stay very leaned into. I do those things, I guess I could say on the side
Mhm,
as I was doing the other pieces. But I
mhm,
think individuals decide to make different decisions. And I think we, up until maybe not about the decisions of our body any longer, but up until that, we were able
mhm.
to make those decisions. And I think that's what you're seeing when people decide to plateau and do something different. It's not to say that they've fallen off the face of the earth and they're not doing things meaningful. It's just to say that they pivoted and did something that was important to them and they felt like they could get the value and individuals could see the value that they bring.
I want you to know that I didn't realize this conversation was gonna be a therapy session because you just basically described my life, and I was like, "So is that what I really did?" Um, so I was divorced probably 10 years ago, right? Early 30s, 2 small kids, and I did the exact same thing you just did. Followed that corporate ladder because the money was calling. It was more of a money thing because I had a daughter that did pageants and dance and all the expensive things and has son that
Right.
was
Because
coming
that
to
takes money.
school and all the expensive things. And the money was driving the career, right? And then now I'm in my 40s, mid 40s. I'm about to get married again.
Oh,
I've pivoted.
congratulations.
Thank you. I've pivoted though unknowingly because my situation is now different. The daughter is in college. I have one more child that is getting more and more expensive by the day. The son, I didn't think he was going to reach his sister's monetary status, but he has. Um, but now I feel like I can do something that's more mission driven. I can
Okay.
do something that really makes me want to get up in the morning and it's no longer tied to the salary. It's tied to the mission because now I work for a nonprofit that helps veterans go
Yep.
from service into the workforce. And then it allows me the freedom to be able to do the podcast that I've been wanting to do for years and to do the public speaking that I love so much. And
Right.
now I'm in this space in my life where I don't wanna be in the
Right.
traditional C-suite,
Right.
although I'm still in a very corporate role.
Yep.
I have made my happiness look like what it looks like for Sierra. You have made it look like what it looks like for you, and
Yeah.
I think that that's a huge thing for women at different phases of their lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And the thing is that I need for us to shudder from the judgment. Like, do
Yes.
not, and that's the challenge. So create those communities that support and provide you
Mhm.
that safety that you need to feel as you're making decisions and going through this. Because it's not And everybody's journey is different. But I will also say everybody's journey is important. So we
Absolutely.
are all bringing something of value to bear that we need to have others appreciate. Because a lot of times we don't let that happen.
Absolutely. that is so true. And then I also have friends that have done the same thing. They reached the top of their corporate journey and then like, oh no, if I'm doing this for you, I can do this for myself. And then they've pivoted and became amazing entrepreneurs. So um and that is one thing that I am loving that these conversations are bringing out, that the she suite looks different for
Yeah.
every person. It does
Yeah.
not mean that you're sitting in the corner office running a Fortune 500 organization. You could be running a nonprofit. You could be running your own business. That journey looks whatever you want it to look like. And so
That's
that's
exactly
what's so
right.
important. So let's talk a little bit about your leadership, because your leadership really spans industries and then cultures. So how does a focus on culture accelerate women's pathways to executive leadership?
So, it's so funny because culture ends up being such a buzzword. It does. And it's funny. I've done different conversations where I've talked about demystifying culture and all the things that
Mhm,
people say it is. This is the reality. All of us live in a culture in our families,
mhm,
in our communities, and in our work. And one of the things that I think is really important to understand about culture is that it is made up of whatever the underlining goal of any system is the best way for me to describe it. Any
mhm,
system, the underlining goal and how you actually accomplish that goal and how you do it is what culture is. It is how you do it. It is so for instance, from my perspective, specifically with the Atlanta Braves, and it's funny, my role started out as human resources. I changed the name of human resources to people capital intentionally because I wanted human resources to be viewed as truly a business partner within the organization. And then I went from people capital and then had the opportunity to have an expanded role that was culture and people. And with culture, it has to do because I have community and I have communications as well. And it has to do with the fact that all of those create the type of environment that people come to work into. And when that environment is created, the environment can either be comfortable, it can be where you want to be, it can be all of those different things. And you're right, I've worked in so many different type of organizations that have their own culture
mhm,
based on how leaders show up, based on how decisions are made, and based on how you feel when you walk in the door. That is what culture is.
mhm.
And so I've had the opportunity to be in some amazing cultures and I've had the opportunity to be in some that aren't as great.
Yep.
But I will tell you, all of it is a learning. And when I talk about it within your family, all of us in our families have roles. You create your own family culture. And
Mhm,
so when you talk about, again, how are you made to feel? When I go to a family event, how do I feel when I walk in? Am I anxious? Am I concerned? Am I happy?
mhm,
It's the same thing for when you walk into an organization. It's the same thing when you walk into any type of community activity that you're doing. It's the very same thing. What I like to say is that leaders have the opportunity to architect what that culture is for their staff. And as a leader, you have the responsibility to create cultures with which individuals want to be a part of. And some leaders do it and may not think that that's their priority. Their priority may be we need to make sure you are productive. And that productivity may be at the expense of you as a person. But that's the reality about what culture is. And
mhm,
it's so interesting because people are quick to say, you need to make sure you create a good culture. Okay, that's great, but so when you talk about that, what are you doing to instill that people want to be a part of what this is?
mhm.
And that's the importance of thinking about culture and what you're trying to create.
That is profound because as we are going through this change with DE&I, culture and inclusion, and all of these different conversations,
Mhm.
how do we get organizations to truly move beyond that service level diversity, it looks good for the press mentality, into genuine inclusion and leadership readiness?
So funny you say that because I was listening to a leader yesterday, and she was talking about, the fact that DEI, the word of DEI it has been demonized, has been all of
Mhm,
those things. And the reality is that we are moving further and further away from being civil. We're moving further and further away from being kind.
mhm,
Because a lot of times when I think about and I talked about DEI before it became DEI, I was in a role with Ernst& Young. There was an amazing role that started 2007, 2006, 2007. It was an inclusiveness leader. And my focus that the firm believed in was to create women and people of color into partners. They
mm,
wanted them to go into the partnership. And the reason they wanted them to go into the partnership is because they wanted their partners to mirror the clients that they had. And this is a global organization. So
mhm,
so when it wasn't even called diversity, I was in a role doing that type of work. So I've always looked at the work of diversity and inclusiveness as a change model. It is a model with which you create where people are able to come in with different thoughts, ideas, experiences, backgrounds, and they're given an opportunity to work in a team and thrive. And what we now have done is we have weaponized DEI in a way with which we have also emboldened people to be mean.
mhm,
I mean, if you were to break it down, that's exactly what's happened.
yeah,
Um, there's a lot of humanity that's gone out of what's happening right now. My only, and I shouldn't say only, the one thing that I think about as we're going through this is I can only imagine what my grandmother went through
mhm,
in a time, because I think I'd have to go back. Grandmother was born in, I don't know, 1920s, 30s. Because my parents are part of, they're the generation that went through desegregation. So my
mhm,
grandmother was before that. And I think about what she went through, and then even my parents went through. And the reality is that if I think about what they went through and what we're going through, we need to have the strength,
mhm,
the fortitude for us to still stand strongly on what just mere humanity should be. We should appreciate the fact that people come from different backgrounds and the fact that they bring different ideas.
mhm,
When you work in a monolithic world, and it's shown, research has shown, um, and even, when you think about organizations, revenue, and all of that has shown that you
mhm,
need to make sure that you're including everyone. For fear of me saying diversity, that you do inclusion,
mhm, yeah, it's important.
because to me, inclusion should not be weaponized like diversity has been.
Absolutely. 100%. So my grandmother is 93, born in 1932. Do the math. I'm not going to do the math. That may be right, may not be right. But anyway, she's
So
born
probably about the same time.
the same age. Yes. And then
Yeah.
my mother was growing up in a small town, Sylacauga, Alabama, and she was
Okay.
one of the few little black female little girls that got pushed to the all-white school in desegregation. So her stories of her experiences are the reason why I truly believe I am so mission forward when it comes to inclusion. You
Mhm.
can call it what you want to call it, but I am always going to fight for inclusion in the workplace, inclusion on the boards that I sit on, inclusion in every aspect of my life because it is so important. And being
Yeah.
a child that I grew up in Escondido, California, so that was where I was until I was about 10 years old, where diversity is just life, right? I
Right.
was the only black child with 2 black parents at the school that I went to. So I was the
Yeah.
only one that truly looked like me, but I didn't care because all of my
Right.
friends, my cousins, my family, they were just this beautiful melting pot of people. And that is what really truly formed who I was. And then I moved to Sylacauga, Alabama, where I was surrounded by people that looked exactly like me. And that was one of the first
Mhm.
things I came home and told my mom. There are
Yeah.
other people that look just like me in my classroom. And she's like, yeah, just wait. It's going to
Yeah.
get real interesting. Because then I had to be forced to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and this whole Southern mentality. But it has truly shaped who I am, and it is the reason why I really decided to do the framework, the human algorithm, to get us back to empathy, adaptability, and that human connection because we are losing the humanity in our leadership, and it's
Yeah.
starting because we're trying to dismantle something that really benefits everybody. Sorry, I got on myself
Right.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move past that. Sorry, I didn't really spend more of this time, but let's talk about your kind of strategy and resilience, right? So, what distinguishes women who survive corporate leadership from women who just thrive in it or who are thriving in it?
So, you know, I think that when you talk about thriving, so let's first of all give the understanding what surviving is. It's
Mhm,
basically getting by. It's just doing what you can to get by and knowing that that's
mhm,
how you have to structure things. Um, I think when you start to thrive, and I think for me, and this is what I talk to people all the time, my singular definition of success doesn't sit in a position.
mhm,
When I think about what success, when I feel and talk about me being successful, it is around, yes, I hope that when people see me, they see me as a leader. I show up, I try to ensure that I'm consistent. I do all the things, right? The
mhm,
other thing that I think that's really critical is that I use my voice to influence and to provide support for those that don't get to have their voices heard.
mhm,
And so for me, thriving is those individuals that I get the opportunity to mentor and they're being successful and they're moving on and finding their own successes based on their own definitions. Um, I find thriving where I have actually stood up for myself in instances where there are times here I didn't. I didn't,
mhm,
and now I do. And I think to the extent of even when we start thinking about worth from a compensation standpoint, asking for what you know you deserve. The answer
Mhm.
still may be no, but you still ask. And so I think I've been able to reshift what thriving looks like. And for me, it's making sure that I'm creating environments and spaces that people can use their own voice because so many times I didn't feel comfortable using mine.
That is amazing. And that is exactly what I feel like empathetic leadership looks like. It is putting the human first and making sure that we're creating these environments for humans to truly thrive, no matter what level of their journey that they're in. We are providing those lived experiences and allowing them to just be who they are. So that takes us definitely into our next segment, which is the human algorithm moment. So thank you. I'm just saying, you're just leading this just wonderful. So, in your experience, how does empathetic leadership create a different type of C suite? And what happens when leaders lose their humanity in pursuit of success? That was a long question.
So, one of the things so remember, I started and I led with the fact that my grandmother sits probably
Mhm.
on my shoulder. Um, I also believe in this concept of karma.
Oh,
Um, and because I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, because I grew up that you needed to treat people the way you want to be treated, for me, um, the reality of all of these things is that I want to be able to sleep at night.
mhm.
I want to ensure the things that I did in the course of a day allows me to know that I have done everything in my power that was humane, that was equitable, that was objective, so I can sleep at night. And it comes down to really truly ensuring that when I have the opportunity to see my grandmother again, that I have made her proud. It also means having the ability, because I do think empathy is you have to have, and it's so funny. I have a woman that no longer works for me who had said that I had no empathy. And I think part of it is that I also believe in accountability.
Wow.
so,
Mhm,
so I do accountability with empathy. So you've got to do. I mean, and raising children, that's what that ends up being.
mhm,
I think you have to hold people accountable. That's not to say that you don't do that with empathy.
mhm.
Just to say that you hold people accountable, because being held accountable in my mind creates, going back to what we talked about, the ability to thrive. And so I take a healthy perspective around the fact that I want to be able to support individuals as their whole self.
Mhm.
But that does not necessarily mean that you're going to appreciate the messages and the feedback that I'm giving you when I'm doing that. I think people get confused with empathy with I'm saying what you want to hear.
Mm,
That's
yes.
not empathy.
Mhm.
Um, it's having the ability to have the balance of knowing and supporting individuals where they are, providing them the space that they need, but also holding them accountable as well.
And this may lead into this next question. You may answer it kind of the same way, but especially as women in HR, how do you navigate the tension between staying true to your principles and who you are and adapting to an evolving organization that is constantly demanding and changing?
So I think one of the things, and it goes back to what we talked about, you have to be
Mhm.
centered. You
Yeah.
have to always be able to go back to your core in any decisions that you're making. I
Mhm.
try to ensure that I am consistent with every single thing that happens, period, full stop. And that doesn't make everybody happy all the time. And
Mhm.
so knowing that and understanding that, I think you realize as an HR practitioner that that's how you have to show up, right? Like
Mhm.
I've always stated, if I piss somebody off today, I've done my job because
Yeah.
I'm not the one to make everybody feel happy. I need everybody to feel as if they've been treated fairly.
Mhm.
And I've been, I hate to say it, it's at 30 years. Like I turned 56 last week. And
Happy birthday.
thank you. And I've been in this profession for quite some time and seen several different things. I think that you I used to always hear, if you stand for everything, if you stand for everything, you fall. I'm saying it wrong, but you have to stand for something or
Yes.
you fall for everything. That's what it
Everything.
is.
There you go.
You have
You
to
can.
stand for something or you fall for everything. And
Mhm.
so that's the one thing that I know I've been taught to do. Like I can talk to you about my mentors and my leaders and those that taught me how to be an HR practitioner.
Mhm.
That's the one thing you have to do because credibility, you lose credibility so quick if you fall for anything.
Yes.
Now, do I piss a lot of people off? Probably. I do it very nicely though. When I have
I
the
can imagine.
conversations, I
I
try to
can
make
imagine.
sure that
Hey, so that's the gift of HR. Like, and you
some
know
would
what?
not necessarily call it a gift, but yes.
This is good. This is good. I love that. So, what role does relational intelligence play in sustaining women leaders at the executive level beyond competence and or credentials?
It's critical. It is critical. One of the things that we don't talk, I don't think enough about is EQ. And the
Mm,
ability to know how to navigate very difficult conversations and relationships and all of those things in a way with which you can masterfully do it.
yes.
And I think for this is what the research says, which I believe in and I know is true. We as women are great collaborators. We know how to bring people together. We know how to get things done. We just are innate with that. And I can easily say to you, I can see it because I raised two sons and got a bonus son. The way that men operate and how they think is very different. And so that is the beauty of having diversity in a room. I don't want to be in a room with all men, and I don't want to be in a room with all women.
Hmm.
You have to have that level of a word that you used earlier, healthy tension, to be
Hmm.
able to get to the right solutions. But you also have to be a master in EQ. You have
Yes.
got to know the importance of EQ, which then commands your ability to create relationships. So and I, it's funny because I think we as parents see and understand that very well because my concept of when I had my children and what that meant, I mean, truly, I was a shepherd for them. My job was not like I've never been that mom that when my sons were growing up, helicopter parenting wasn't even around.
Mhm.
I definitely was not that mom. Um, and I think that my role and my job was to create amazing human beings so that they could live their lives and walk in their purpose. That was my job. My job was to shepherd them through that. That my job was not to have their roles and experience either. My grandmother, and it may not have been my grandmother, it may be a very good friend of mine, but The one thing that I always remember being said is that their testimony is not mine.
Mhm.
So you have to make sure you grant people the opportunity to have their own testimony, but that also sits in the fact that you have to know how to do relationships well.
Mhm. That is a professional nugget. That is a parental nugget. That is just hitting every level. Because now that I am a mother with a college student, there is no book that prepares you to just completely let
No,
go.
no, ma'am, not at all.
Okay. Um, so this has been a learning experience for me. So one of my bonus children also went to college this year too. And I have had to learn how to step back. And I remember having this conversation with her. She was calling me and having a fit about something. And I was like, listen, you're 18, you're in college, you are essentially on your own now. My
Right,
parenting is going to start getting rolled back. Like, I will always be here for you to talk, be a sounding board, but
right,
me
right,
telling
right,
you what to do, those days are gone, my love. Like,
right,
and I'm gonna be like, okay, well, what do you want to do about that? How do you want this? I was like, you're gonna think of me more of a therapist than a mother at this point because I'm turning the dial back. So it's been an interesting dynamic for sure in our household, but she's finally catching on. But I also had to realize that her college experience is not going to be what my college experience was. And I noticed I was trying to push that on her of you need to join more clubs and be more social and get out of your
right,
room more and go to a party, go do something. And she's like, that's just not me. That's just not what I'm
right,
interested in. I'd rather sit
right.
here and study and eat my snacks and watch Scandal for the 50th time. Okay, well, definitely not what your mother was doing at that age, but I'm kind of glad you're not out partying like your mother was doing because my grades reflected that quality and clearly her method is working a lot better than mine. Um, as we close out, I ask all of my guests this one last final question. And so it
Yeah,
is what is one truth about women that are aiming for the C suite that the world isn't ready to hear, but absolutely needs to?
I think the one thing that they need to hear is that we're fierce.
Mm,
And I think what happens is that when there's an assumption of, the words that are used for women that are in the C suite. I'd love to say assertive. I'm sure there's different words that are used for me
uh-huh,
because I had to get things done. And I had to constantly think about all of the things that are around me. We're fierce. And
mhm,
not and I know that's one statement and it encapsulates a lot of things. But when I say we're fierce, we are dealing with things that individuals don't even consider
mhm.
that we think about to ensure that we show up every single day.
I love it. That's perfect. Well, Dr. Rose, thank you so much for this amazing conversation that reminds us that women don't just belong in the she suite, we thrive in it and we transform it. And as leadership isn't just about reaching the top, it's about redefining what leadership looks like from the top and for each individual. So thank you so much for being in the she suite. I appreciate you so much and I'm so glad that SHRM Executive Network brought us together many,
I
many
am
years ago. Please, please, please. Hopefully we'll have you come back to the She Suite sometime soon. And
Yep.
just thank you so much for being so open and honest with us today. We greatly
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for having me.
Thank you. And I will see all of you on the next episode of the She Suite.
1,